Hello, and welcome to This is Cohousing, the Cohousing podcast. I'm Charles Durrett, author and principal architect at the Cohousing Company, and I coined the word cohousing. In today's episode, we're discussing the innovative new housing in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Leading this project is Gary Morrison, currently the CEO of the University of Fraser Valley's Property Trust, also known as Campus Communities, overseeing development of 30 acres and at two university campuses, planning to develop 600 dwellings, breaking ground in 2028, and another similar number at the university's Chilliwack campus in the 2030s. They are all integrated into blurring the lines between campus and surrounding community, includes coffee shops and all the rest that goes with a mixed-use development. I believe that this is the future. Highly integrated intergenerational housing, student housing, senior housing, all coming together to make a village, if you will. This project is already rolling. In other words, it's got a lot of concept developed and it's very thoughtful. Welcome, Gary, and thank you for joining us.
My pleasure to be here.
A little bit more background on Gary, because one of the things we're going to talk about today is the business of making co-housing and co-housing inspired environments and all of the things that are going to that touch on um, community as a cornerstone to making a more viable society. So Gary has a broad background in finance, real estate development, and community building, has launched several startup companies in biotechnology and IT. He discovered co-housing in 2013 and created LiveWell Co-housing with the goal of more professionalizing and streamlining co-housing developments.
So, generally speaking, how how did I, a somewhat real estate finance guy, end up caring about co-housing and starting live or co-housing? In a nutshell, my background is poor kid from Liverpool, grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, emigrated to Canada, got myself an education. I have an honors degree in mathematics, got a business degree, got a job with Intrawest Corporation, the big ski resort developer. By the end of it, I was financing North American operations. I was a big deal. I spun out on my own, started creating biotechnology companies. Simultaneously, I'm sharing a co-work place with Alan Forrester, really innovative creative developer here in Vancouver. He says, just over a casual conversation, have you heard of this guy, Chuck Durrett, and co-housing? Of course, I'd never heard of it. He walked me through the whole idea of designing communities with long-term social connection and well-being as being the basis for all of the design parameters. And what I find with almost everyone is you either get it or you don't. How could we not think of these projects as forums for social connection? There's no other way to think of it. And so from that point, I actually pivoted my whole career. Moved to an experimental project that was community friendly, got into a bidding war on a co-housing project, and then I spent 10 years working through Live co-housing to try and professionalize and try and bring all of those skills I'd learned from corporate life and implement them.
Gary, tell me more about your new projects.
Well, I'm lucky in a way in that somewhat corporate real estate in an academic context, I've been given the mandate to both deliver on the real estate side, but also build community. That's an explicit goal of the university. What's going on there is that the two campuses I'm working at have an issue, and that is they are becoming known as commuter campuses. We have students, faculty driving in single occupancy vehicles, going to class, sometimes students driving home for lunch, driving back in the afternoon. And that's undermining that sense of the university attendance experience, the academic life. We have a sea of asphalt surrounding the university itself, and the university wants to get away from that, wants to build community. So we've approached the project and the whole thinking about the master planning for this in an approach of how can we energize campus? How can we get students to stay? And how can we broaden the housing options for faculty, staff, students, and the general public, blurring the lines between where campus ends and where the surrounding community begins? So if we bring in a few independent restaurants, independent coffee shops, if we can create a sense of being instead of asphalt parking, then the plan is we'll energize campus. And ultimately, the belief is we can enhance education by building community on the edge of campus. That's the mission.
That's a great mission. And I love the potential for campuses to bring a rich and embellished world to all of us. I really do, because there's so much there in terms of proximity and learning and all the rest. I see a great deal of advantages in this direction. Co-housing inspired neighborhoods, otherwise known as high functioning neighborhoods in and around campus. If you were to describe a high functioning neighborhood as an anthropologist, what would it look like to you?
You see, everyone talks about building community. Everyone wants it. So I speak to architects, and one of my slide decks includes some images of award-winning architecture in British Columbia. Not a single one of those images includes people.
Mm.
The typical architectural interpretation of building community is building a beautiful building. So what I've developed, I'm calling it the professionalization of community building 2.0, because what I tried professionalization 1.0 with my company Livo Co-housing had mixed results. So I've, shall we say, evolved some of my thinking about how to deliver on community. Now, I hesitate to say co-housing or even co-housing inspired, because I have committed sacrilege. I've limited the amount of input from future residents. I've tried to emulate that process, bring all of the lessons I learned through Live or Co-housing and apply it to this professionalization 2.0.
I mean, you might not call it co-housing inspired or co-housing light. If you listen to the first podcast, you heard of a big affordable housing project that we designed that was very co-housing inspired. And my guest, she had compared regular subsidized housing with this particular low income housing project. And she described people knowing each other, caring about each other, and supporting each other as par on that project, and that was doable even without participation in the design process. So, I mean, we are going to be broadening the application of co-housing in the US, no doubt about it. We have a sign in our office says if it doesn't work socially, why bother? So the challenge is figuring out how to make it socially work even without the participation. But again, you have a lot of residents who come and go, although professors often need a very
Mhm.
supportive environment because the professor, she might have a community at school, but the husband is brand new to the area and doesn't have anywhere near the same level of community and really needs that to be happy. But let's say that it's co-housing light or co-housing inspired. What is that social life that you're looking for between the buildings?
So the social life must be based upon social interactions as much as people want. I'm trying to take all of the benefits of co-housing and apply it in a more, you know, private sector industry approach, then if ideally creating a place in the center facing campus, quite literally, just across the street, where we have that coffee shop, independent restaurants, we'll have some terracing there, some outside seating, and we want to get a blend of people and a creative collision zone. So the vision is there. This vision of the benefits of community life.
Let me just step back for a second and say that the design process of consequence is not the buildings. The design consequence is the social choreography,
Correct.
setting up a stage that makes that part and parcel natural default behavior, basically. They do exist sometimes, largely because people will have something in common. They're either going to college or they have some association with the college. But that's the value of the early participation. Basically, in regular co housing, people move in as a community. And the architecture only has one job, which is to sustain the sense of community over time once the honeymoon has worn off. Well, the last thing you want to do
Exactly.
is create housing for people to go home and look at their media. I mean, to the extent that you can curtail that is to the extent that you're on the right track. Let me ask you a couple questions. What would be the next step if there was, there's a movement afoot in the US to get on college campuses a senior co-housing. And the thinking is that these folks who come to live on campus can be tutors, they can help with fundraising, they can volunteer at many, many levels and have serious purpose, which is always valuable to the individuals. I mean, you can't always just think about the broad picture without bringing it back to the individuals. How is it going to affect their life? And there's great precedence for how a high functioning community in the context of a campus brings so much to the table. Gary, is it possible that 10 seniors could come to you and say, hey, as part of your project, we want to do a senior co housing? Is that possible?
I'm from the school that anything's possible, but the devil's in the detail, right? I'm a detail guy. I got to work out the details. Now, just taking a step back from that, there's already a 55 plus community adjacent to the university. We see, retired boomers now walking sometimes on campus or around campus. There's no question seniors want to live in that campus lifestyle. What first thing we've got to be careful of though is we've got to be respectful of the university itself. We want to blur the edges. We don't want to blur the whole campus. So, our master planning design to try and achieve those two goals, to be respectful of areas of campus where we want a safe place for students. Some of them are still, 17, so kids. So we got to create a safe place where they can be in their bubble with other students, but at the same time, I want to get away from asphalt parking lots on the periphery. And if we can build a great community there, bring restaurants, bring coffee shops closer, then we can energize the periphery. And that's where the seniors can play a role. Now, in terms of the programming itself, why not, Chuck? Why not, in those coffee shops, in those restaurants, have advertisements for tutors?
Hmm.
Why not try that,
Hmm.
and do that tutoring over coffee? On the university side, the university is also offering courses for seniors. In Chilliwack, there's an elders college, customizes courses for retirees who have a lot to share. So that's already happening in Chilliwack. Not only is there an opportunity there, the fundamental pillars to allow implementation of that are available as well.
Yeah, I find that people in co housing volunteer much more when they know each other better. So, since we're talking about a university, they could do the academic measurements to figure out, for example, in that 55 plus housing, how much time people are spending together. Like, for example, in our common house, we have 450 people hours per week amongst 55 adults. That is a consequential metric. It means that they're watching TV less and they're communicating much, much more to the point where people say, hey, I just started volunteering at the hospital. We need another volunteer. Are you up? I just got recruited to do English as a second language by one of my co-housers. That cross communication is what fosters so much volunteerism. And I think it's even more than if there's a post-it somewhere that says, "Hey, I can tutor math," or something like that. I'm just a big fan of that enriched estuary of people communing in a productive way. One of the places that inspires me the most is the Salk Institute in San Diego, where they have benches and chalkboards everywhere, and people are stopping all the time in the life between the buildings
Mm.
and sharing with each other. So, conversely, back to the possibility of professors living in co housing on campus, what would it take for that to happen, Gary? Or would you be nervous about that?
Put it this way, I'm willing to explore that. I some of the professors at UFE know what co-housing is. When I was doing my original consultations to launch this plan, some of them just got it. As soon as they heard we were thinking about co-housing inspired types of housing, that was it. I had a group of stakeholders, professors who were on board. So those professors are already there and interested. Secondly, just going back to this idea of collaborative research, I've already had a professor who wants to work with whatever community we build to explore on a long term basis life and community in our projects. Absolutely, those professors and that collaboration between residential living and academic living cohabitating together. There's an interest there from an academic perspective.
The difference between knowing and speculating, that's what an academic format can bring to the table. We want this to happen, we want that to happen, but in on the experiments we've already made, this does happen and this doesn't happen. For example, the 55 plus, I'd be curious in their common facilities how much time people just voluntarily get together. That's it. That's low hanging fruit from an understanding point of view. Somebody though does have to camp out there, absorb everything, and then understand it. That's why when I went to Denmark to study co-housing, I went for 13 months because it really did mean understanding what was really happening, not just speculating on what people wanted it to
Yes.
happen and then talking themselves into it.
The big question is, Chuck, how do we get there? This approach, I'm trying to build on those lessons from live or co-housing. Can we engineer a sense of belonging? And then secondly, Chuck, one thing we haven't mentioned is can we make it scalable? Because bumping off one project at a time is not going to work. You know, that we have some major problems facing our society, as everyone knows, everyone can feel it. It's palpable now. Our communities are breaking
Mhm,
down. We
mhm.
need to see co-housing or community orientated housing everywhere, every city in North America. So I'm thinking not only will it hopefully work, but I want to make it scalable. I want to see other developers copy it. So
Yeah.
the basic approach is play on the themes of co-housing. But again, I'm going to commit that sacrilege in that I'm not going to establish the group early. What I'm going to do is identify a site that's near amenities within walking distance. And if the amenities aren't there, we'll build it. We'll build the coffee shop. We'll build the restaurant. So now we have a somewhat pedestrian friendly site. Now I've created community design guidelines, not for the physical architecture, but master planning design guidelines with the goal of enhancing community connection in the project. So it includes things like not not designing this community based upon easy car access. Let's provide easy pedestrian access. Let's include some car sharing options. Let's make sure units are there's good soundproofing in the room so the neighbors can have privacy when they want privacy.
Amen, brother.
Let's include kitchens, potluck style kitchens, as well as more enhanced kitchens. As you know, I know, food is the glue. Let's include a library. Let's include a green space where there's a place to go for privacy where you just want to zen out, read a book by yourself, and a place where you want to get together with your neighbors and have a barbecue under a nice pagoda and chill out with some colleagues. Let's make it intergenerational. But for the kids, let's have some kid zones, allowing kids to be kids, and allowing them to run free safely, so they don't bug everyone else. I say that as a parent. So let's think about designs and those elements. So now we're thinking about the physical architecture in terms of how the community connections and the people are going to live within that physical architecture. Then I went out and I validated this. So fortunately, because of live or co-housing, I have a few friends in the co-housing scene. So I invited some colleagues from Winsong. We arranged a focus group. I invited the co-housing people. Invited some members of the alumni association, the professors. I invited some students and other potential people who would live in this project. So while they were not designing it for themselves, I got their reality check. Instead of having the architect prioritize things for me, I got potential future residents or people who care prioritize these elements.
Well, that's the only way to do it.
Now, so that's where I'm at. Now, the next step. So I'm going to be going out. I'm going to rezone, subdivide the sites, find developers, give them the community design guidelines, find the right developer, someone who's not just going to blow out condos to the highest bidder, but someone who is thinking about this project in terms of a legacy. I want a developer who realizes blowing out condos is not the legacy they want to leave. They want to leave a legacy of a great community that they're proud of, where
Amen.
they had an impact on society, as I do. The magic there is going to be implementing marketing programs, advertising to attract people who value community. I'm applying somewhat of the 80-20 rule in that 80% of all of the community activity happening in any community project is being driven by the 20%, the small group of people who are just energized. They are the magical, wonderful people who can create a community. And then they will drag everyone else into community with them. So that's going to require me to do things like get the word out that this is what we want. We want people who are not afraid of saying hi to their neighbor, who want to know their neighbor's name, want to know the kids' names.
Amen, brother.
And then finally, what we're going to have to do is I'll create a neighborhood association to oversee multiple little communities. I believe people have forgotten how to live in a village. They're going to need a little help. So I'll arrange that through a neighborhood association. We'll have community facilitators for the first year or two, helping communities launch, helping them organize potlucks, organize farmers markets. And from there, if we've attracted people who get it, then they'll take ownership of the community themselves and they'll carry it forward. So that's the general plan. It's a work in progress.
Okay. Well, let's back up a little bit. Scalable. There's an organization in Denmark, and they just did a 3-year survey of in person, interviewed 80,000 seniors in downtown Copenhagen, a town of only 667,000 people. Batteries of interviewers,
Mm.
people who really studied how to get information out of people. But the bottom line of those interviews, they asked those 80,000 of these 5 housing types, which was 1 single family house, maybe the one you already live in, 2 is a condo, 3 is an apartment, 4 is assisted care, and 5 is co-housing. Which of those 5 do you want to grow old in? And by far, like 55% of the respondents said co-housing, which surprised everybody, especially the Danish government, the Copenhagen government, and they're in the throes right now of rezoning a great deal of downtown Copenhagen to start to accommodate that
Mm.
kind of housing.
You said 65%?
55.
55? 55 still great.
Yeah, I know. And this was front page news in 2 biggest newspapers in Denmark, Information and Politiken. And really, the town is morphing Old Town to make co-housing a big part of the fabric. Not a lot of new buildings. They're basically rehabbing old buildings, but the senior co-housing was started in Denmark in 1985. So 40 years later. 40 years later, many of those people who were in the interviews had visited co-housing, had seen co-housing. It was just so palpable to them that their friends and family who lived there were in a safe, giving, economical, stimulating, healthy place. And therefore, they made that choice. And therefore, that tipping point was able to happen. Otherwise, you're pushing a big stone up a long mountain to get the public to believe it. But these guys there was no sales job on the co-housing on this thing. They had enough experience with it. They said, this is how I want to grow old.
Mhm.
So I still believe, even if you hope to, grab that kind of behavior between the buildings and between the residents where people know each other and at least care enough to know their names, their kids, their birthdays, and come to a birthday party, et cetera, et cetera. I think they're going to have to see functioning co-housing. And you can see some in the BC area.
Mhm.
Winsong is a good example. But the point is that I think there's gonna be a show me aspect, as opposed to I'm being convinced that this is the way to go as marketing is a big deal in our cultures. But I feel like it's easy to market something that you can take photographs of and go, we're talking about something like this. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? So, okay, then the next point that you were making was
Well, it was professionalization in terms of process and then scalability.
right. Yeah. I mean, scalability is a big issue, but the number one thing that drew me into co-housing was the very first place I visited. It was just dead obvious that this is different. This is a high functioning neighborhood where people are stopping. having a beer together at the picnic table, stopping on various front porches and having coffee together, having dinner together in one co-housing community 7 nights a week.
Mm,
It's available 7 nights a week, but people participate probably 3 or 4 times a week. I lived there for 6 months. To the point where it starts to grow into being part of a culture, if you will, our culture, as opposed to, not. I did a presentation in Vancouver not long ago, and this woman came up to me afterwards and she said, Chuck, I've lived in this condo project in Copenhagen for 6 years with my now 6-year-old son. Presumably, she was divorced, she moved out, she moved to a condo project. She said, I have not met one person. I know the place. It's very centripetal. In other words, there's plenty of ways for people to get to know each other. They have to have an excuse to know each other, like a common dinner, or like the five of us are going to go buy a brand new lawnmower for the whole community, like the 10 of us are going to try to make this place more fire safe by, schlepping lots of branches around. Like there's a lawn mowing crew who once a month they make sure the place gets mode or more frequently. There's a gardening committee. There's a pet committee to make sure everybody feels comfortable with all the various pets there. I mean, they have so many excuses to get together. I can walk through my community every week. I will see at some picnic table 3 or 4 people using their excuse. Our job is to figure out when the next party is going to be. I mean, we have a robust party culture in our co-housing. I mean, we had one Friday night, we had one Sunday night, and apparently we're having one Wednesday night. It's crazy. But that's all because it's easy because of the I know you factor.
mhm.
So that'll be a big, interesting anthropological experience for you, Gary, to try to figure out how to enmesh these relationships. It's an exciting challenge, but
You have to care.
yeah,
The nature of real estate development, and even when you care, as I do, the nature of doing what I do, where I'm juggling a dozen consultants, deadlines, money, on all of that. Well, it's not. It's actually not surprising how easy it is to get sucked into Gantt charts, budgets, and all that stuff, and lose sight of the vision. So we
right.
have the guidelines. Are what is my rallying call to get everyone aligned here. Even changing the name of the company. It's no longer UFE Properties Trust. It is Campus Communities. That's not an accident. And the other thing, I'm not living in a co-housing community. I have a property in a community that is completely energized. We have annual bingo. It cannot be missed. It's potluck bingo. On the following weekend, we'll have the sandcastle competition. It cannot be missed. It's legendary. Some of these sandcastles built by large groups of adults are fantastic. We have these shared mowers. We have the board meetings. We don't call it a board, it's a committee, but the idea is, what snacks are going to be brought to that meeting? That's going to be a highlight. So even the administrative tasks become opportunities to connect. So I'm living it. I love it. I completely agree with you that our society has forgotten the power of the village.
Yeah, village
It's
life.
not lost. It's not lost. It's forgotten. We need reminders. And there
Mhm.
will be a critical mass to this, and it will grow because people have heard, as I experienced in my university consultations, professors had heard about co-housing. As soon as they heard that's on the table, we're on. I also take comfort from, I think it's the Bank of Montreal or Bank of Nova Scotia up here in Canada. They do an annual survey of boomer intentions and what the boomers are looking for when they retire. So consistently, about 20 to 21% of those prospective retirees rank community connection as being on their A list. So this is good news because 20% of the boomer market is still a substantial number of people. That's enough for us to get rolling. 80% may still be asleep to the idea, but just working with that 20% is enough to get more projects built. The flip side of this is we need to educate developers. We need to show developers not only make it easier for them to do this, but also show them there's a business opportunity too. And it actually in my view, the business opportunity is it's risk management more so than making a whole bunch of money. Because if you can assure that you have a block of condos sold or taken well in advance, you can relax a little. To your first question, is there room for a dozen or 20 people looking to rent a project? Yes, that allows the developer to say, okay, that's 20 units I don't have to worry about anymore. We got some long-term commitments. And then the thing I'm struggling with on that one is how do we manage the ask when they start asking for all sorts of things? That needs to be managed. But it's a good risk management plan for developers.
Oh, it totally is. I mean, co-housing groups bring three things to the development side of the equation. One is they bring help with the entitlements. I mean, when they're championing a project, it's very hard to say no to them. Like where I live, you have 35, 40 people at the podium. I'm not saying it got out of the way, but they really got on board. Let's put
Yeah.
it that way. And two is that they do all the marketing. There are developers out there who spend up to 8% marketing their project, 8% of the gross. A developer told me that not too long ago. And then three is hopefully they can bring some capital to your project. But if it's all rental, they may not be able to bring any capital. If there's some for sale condos, with a deposit and one thing or another, they can probably bring some capital. The projects that I mostly work on, people bring 20% of their house sales price so that that project can get built. And that sounds like a lot, but they do it in the context of incredibly capable mortgage brokers who are really coaching folks on how to buy a house. In Vancouver, there's some amazing mortgage brokers because I've worked with them on a couple of projects, and they really set the groups up for success. But don't get me wrong, Gary, I totally get that you are right. But I find the best way to do it is here's what we can do, here's what we can't do. Even in the context of what we can do, we have to prioritize the hell out of everything. And we do. The funny thing is, of all the workshops I do with groups with site design, common house design, private house design, the most interesting one is where we prioritize all the costs because it's extremely value laden. Do we have tile countertops or a hot tub? They sound absolutely disparate. They sound ridiculous that they would be even on the same list. But money is money, period. And you have a finite amount of money. I need to know where your value is really laid. And it's an immensely powerful community building experience because for a whole day, people are talking about things like, well, if we have a hot tub, we can actually manage a lot of in there. It's a very relaxing environment, and we
It's a great
basically
idea.
yeah, it's we basically because you're relaxed, everything is possible. Anyway, I find it just an amazing experience. Usually, a group in the course of a design process comes up with about 40 possible costs that aren't in the basic budget, and we can only build about 20 of them or less. But once you do the 1 through 40 line items, there's no conversation about it anymore. Okay, we had the argument. Now we saw that 6 months ago. It's no longer an issue now. That just falls off the wayside. Over and over again, I'm dead surprised by what they find to be the priorities.
Chuck, no one's done as many co-housing projects as you. I dabbled. Livewell co-housing was a 10-year venture. Even I started to see patterns group to group. With that 40 list of items you just mentioned,
Yeah.
it's the same
Yeah.
list of 35 things. So for professionalization 2.0, I'm trying to identify that list of consistent themes as the design guidelines because I can't clone Chuck Durrett and Katie McCannett. Like that's, if I could, I'd do it. Instead, if we want scalability, I don't think we can run workshops one at a time across North America with all the developers. Community design guidelines. Let's build that menu, run a focus group then to prioritize. So then we do the physical design, we've just fast tracked that whole thing. Then we bring in the architect, then we bring in the builder. then we advertise and we try to create all that wonderful magic of that happened during those workshops. We try and duplicate that in the marketing phase by attracting that 20% of energized people who will make their own community regardless of what the thing looks like and won't be traumatized from the construction project. So that's the concept. I think there's something there.
I do too. Oh, I'm happy to help. I really am. I mean, I feel like it's not exactly low hanging fruit. There's a system. I mean, as you know, we have a very deliberate system to getting a new housing, but the design process runs 6 to 9 months typically for us. And by the way, the entitlement process, the approval process usually runs less too, because when you get a bunch of school teachers motivated, everybody kind of wants to help them. That's my experience over and over. You get folks who get up to the podium and articulate why we only need one parking place per house instead of two, like they did in Vancouver, by the way, in a single family house neighborhood. You can imagine what the neighbors were saying. They're going to park up the streets, etc. These, a recent Philippine immigrant with her 6-year-old daughter standing next to her made the case about why we only need one parking place, why we don't want to asphalt up the whole neighborhood, and they made the argument better than I could. I tried to make arguments. I did make arguments, but I couldn't make arguments as good as the various residents could. And we got through Vancouver in one hearing, including a major rezone. I'm writing another book right now, taking co-housing to the world. And the whole premise of that book is every project starts off with asking, who are we as a culture? Who do we want to become as a culture? And how do we get there? And that happens in, Pakistan and Chilliwack. They're vastly different cultures. In fact, I've done co-housing right across the street from each other that were vastly different subcultures. And so they manifested themselves quite differently. I mean, I wouldn't argue that it is the same 35 list over and over. I was blown away in Oklahoma because it's a different culture, Oklahoma is. They didn't want sustainably grown wood, but they did want ground source heat pumps because, as they told me early in the process, Chuck, this is what we do in Oklahoma. We drill. We drill, drill, drill. So they drilled amazing number of pipes, like 450 pipes to get all their heating for free because they just got thermal heating. And, that changes from culture. I can't even predict what it's gonna look like. But end of the day, it's funny, it only takes about 10 or 15 minutes to solve those problems, but I'd rather do it in a non-speculative way. That said, I fully understand, especially in the context of campuses, that there's gotta be a way that doesn't necessarily involve the future residents.
Because the study groups are great. Once you get the group onto that train, I had in one project, the local retired school principal stand up in council meetings, and those councillors were afraid of this guy. Like they don't mess with the retired principal. So yeah, the magic can be there once you get to that stage. My live well experience was that the challenges we ran into were groups would not hire a development manager, would try to pump as much information out of me as they could and get me to work in a very limited scope and then go off and try and do all of the planning, do the land acquisition themselves, and they'd miss, the geothermal.
Yeah,
You got to rely on experts for that. Some
yeah,
sites are great,
right,
sometimes some sites
yeah,
aren't. The
that's right.
site that's a great deal might not have sufficient water pressure for fire safety on a multi-story building. So it's the same old story for anyone who's been in the real estate industry for a while. We've seen hydrology issues, no geotech issues, all these things. They're practically checklist for us. So the one tip for any new co-housing group listening now to our podcast: hire a development consultant, hire a good development consultant who has the scar tissue to prove it, who's done a few
Yeah,
projects, seen a few
that's
things go
right.
wrong. So that was one area where I saw co-housing groups go offside. The other area was that land acquisition.
They can't do it. Frankly, very rarely can co-housing groups pull that off. These days, the most successful co-housing groups, there's just a couple people in the group who put the money down for the site and said, who wants to participate? And then if enough people come to the table, then you can afford it. If enough people don't come to the table, then you might have to walk away from an option. But you're dead right. And they can make mistakes left and right. The number one mistake is if they try to buy a site together, even if it's only 7 or 8 households. And after 55 projects, I have a ton of empirical data on this. One group came to me, we love each other. We've been in each other's lives since our kids were in preschool. We go to vacations together. As soon as they had a site, 5 households dropped out the
Yeah.
day after. Some line items, and that is certainly the most difficult one to get consensus. Hey, Gary, let's segue to the fact that if you're in British Columbia, my presentation's in May 19th,
It's in Abbotsford, so it's the University of the Fraser Valley's Abbotsford campus.
and the public is welcome.
Absolutely, 6:30 p.m. Check the website, but 6:30 p.m. Abbotsford campus.
And you will see the machinations of the future of co-housing, I think. The future of co-housing is not going to just be 30 families who co-develop a project, although that is the bedrock of co-housing, no doubt about it. But it's time to do a co-housing where people know each other even before they move in. On May 21st at the Pacific Gardens in Nanaimo, there's going to be a presentation. On May 20th, just down the road from Abbotsford, at the Common House of Creekside Co-housing, there's another presentation. Thanks, Gary, very, very much, man. It was
My pleasure.
very
And Chuck, it was a pleasure to chat with you today. Let's change the world together.
absolutely. Why not? If you're actually interested in living in a sustainable neighborhood where people know each other, care about each other, and support each other, you can get information about Gary at the University of Fraser Valley. You can get plenty of information from our website, cohousingco.com. And I want to thank our production staff, which is Natachai Kongajorn Kitsuk and Melissa Turnbull. And if this conversation resonated with you at all, please consider subscribing and even rating us. Go ahead and rate us.
Be kind,
Uh,
everyone.
and until next time, I'm Charles Durrett. Thanks for being part of our conversation today. Thanks for joining us on the Co-Housing Podcast. If you're looking to learn more about co-housing and building a sustainable community, high-functioning neighborhoods, you can find more resources at cohousingco.com. And if this conversation resonated with you at all, please consider subscribing and sharing it with somebody interested in living in a sustainable neighborhood where people know each other, care about each other, and support each other. Until that next time, I'm Charles Durrett. Thanks for being part of our conversation today.